Well, if you are a Canadian immigration aspirant, then you would have definitely come across the word LMIA. Labor Market Impact Assessment. Yes, this important word really holds the key to the Canadian immigration matters nowadays. Most of the applications, in fact, a lot of applications nowadays, do require LMIAs, especially when you talk about work permits in Canada. Be it high wage, low wage, labor, agriculture, nanny, whatever, LMIA holds the key. But what a lot of people don't know is that how exactly is an LMIA done? I get tons of calls every day, and a lot of people want to understand that Sahil, what exactly is an LMIA? How is it done? What does my employer need to get an LMIA? Can my employer get an LMIA? Is he eligible? My employer does not know what to do, or in fact, I don't know whether this LMIA is genuine, not genuine, all of those questions. Well, with tons of those questions backing me up, I thought of making this video where we explain the basics of LMIA and how exactly is an LMIA done. Well, that will explain what exactly are the requirements of an LMIA and will give you much inputs on what your employer would require, or if you are an employer, then what would you require if you need an LMIA. Please be tuned till the end. My name is Sahil. Guys, welcome back once again. My name is Sahil and I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant and I practice in Ontario. My office is here. If you have to get in touch with me, my number is on the screen and the details are there in the description box. More than happy to connect with you. Before we proceed any further, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon because we talk a lot about Canadian immigration. And if you are an aspirant of coming to Canada, then this is the channel that you must be subscribed to all the time. So guys, today's important topic is LMIA or Labor Market Impact Assessment Report. Now, as you already know that if you want to apply for a work permit in Canada, then a closed work permit would be more suitable in a number of cases. If you want to apply for a closed work permit, then you need to have either an LMIA position where the position has been approved by ESDC with a positive LMIA, or the position of the company has an LMIA exempt position available where you can apply for a closed work permit. Since this video today is focusing only on LMIA, let's just look at what are the kind of LMIAs available in the market and whether you want to apply for one of those or not. The first kind of LMIA today is the high wage or the low wage positions. Now, this particularly means, and this particularly goes by the median wage of that particular occupation and the median wage of the province where the employer is located. With respect to that, if you are offering a particular employee a salary below the median wage, then you have to go for a low wage position of an LMIA. If the salary offered is above the median wage, then the position offered will be a high wage position. The other kind of an LMIA would be the agriculture worker related LMIA. Now, be it seasonal, agriculture stream, high wage, or the low wage, a number of different types under the agriculture stream are available where even laborers can be brought to Canada and also seasonal work permits are also allowed. The other type of an LMIA would be the LMIA to support permanent residency for a particular foreign national. Now, whether it's there to support the Federal Skilled Worker Program, the CEC, or the FST, if the employee agrees and the employer also agrees to support the permanent residency application for a particular employee, then that becomes a permanent residency based LMIA which supports that particular thing. The other kind of an LMIA would be a GTS, which is the Global Talent Stream. As you already know that a GTS LMIA basically focuses on very specialized positions for innovative companies which have been referred to by the ESDC, and those particular companies want to do LMIS for very specific positions. In that particular situation, it would go for a global talent stream LMIA. Usually companies like the tech companies wanting to hire maybe very specific high wage people would go under this category. Last but not the least, we have the in-home caregiver category LMIAs, where people who are coming to Canada to take care of either children or people with high medical needs can go for an LMIA. There are a couple of other, kind of work permits, LMIA exempt or LMIA based positions as well. But these are the broad categories which are usually under discussion and are majority used to hire people or foreign nationals outside Canada. They're brought to Canada as temporary foreign workers and then they can continue their journey onwards to a permanent residency. Now, before we look at the kind of documents or the eligibility factors tied to a particular employer or an LMIA, let's just look at the number of steps involved or the kind of steps involved in a particular LMIA issuance process. First is the processing fees. Nowadays, the LMIA processing fees is kept at $1,000, which is kept by ESDC or Service Canada, which is more popularly known as Service Canada. Service Canada charges $1,000 as its fees. No taxes involved. That is something that has to be borne by the employer only. If your employer wants to hire a third party representatives such as myself, or maybe a Canadian lawyer, a Canadian RCIC, or a paralegal practicing in Ontario, these three type of people, then they must pay the professional fees of such professionals. They, depending upon where the professional is working, there would be specific charges, which is the tax component, which will be billed directly to the employer. In this particular situation, the employee is not supposed to shell out a single penny for the LMIA processing, and nor is the employer supposed to get it reimbursed from the employee in any way, which means the employer cannot charge the employee, cannot take it in cash or kind in any other way from the employee. The LMIA processing charge, the professional fees, any advertising fees must be borne by the employer at its own cost at all times. At no time should that be borne by the employee at any stage of the application. The other kind of fees that may be involved could be advertising fees. Now, the kind of recruitment platforms used would be a minimum number of 3 platforms, and it should run, or the ad should run for consecutive 4 weeks before the LMIA is submitted, and the time to submit the LMIA after the ad should be 3 months. Okay, so once the ad has run for 4 weeks consecutive, then after that 3 months is the time. The ad should continue to run up until the LMIA is approved. Please remember, the ad must continue. You should not discontinue the ad. Also, the job bank should remain active. Now, there is a difference in principle and difference in what we practice. We want to go more than 3 platforms. There are multiple websites that are available, including the job bank. So everybody who wants to go for an LMIA must use job bank and the other platforms, right? And then also, once you submit the LMIA, keep them active, make sure that the ads are still running. Now, the other steps would be going for new employers. If there has been no LMIA issued to you in the 6 years prior to this, and if you have never had a temporary foreign worker work for you, then you could be subject to a review based on a selection criteria which is picked up by Service Canada, and you will be intimated in advance, and you should follow the guidelines that come across. The next would be having a transition plan. Now, this is mandatory for a high wage LMIA. Once a person or an employer wishes to hire an high wage employee, the employer must submit a transition plan, which means the high wage employee should join the company as a temporary foreign worker. The employer must prepare a plan where the employee will train Canadian permanent residents and citizens, and ultimately the employee will leave Canada, and then the Canadian permanent residents and the citizens will take over the work. Okay, so there has to be a transition plan involved. After that, the wages must hit above the median wage if you want to do a high wage LMIA, or it can be a low wage LMIA if you're doing below the median wage. If you are doing below the median wage, then you mandatorily have to agree to provide transportation cost, housing accommodations, or at least services or support for housing accommodation, then health insurance until the provincial health insurance is available to the employee. Then workplace safety is also very important. Once all of this is provided, the last step would be going in for an interview as well. The whole process starts with the job advertisement, where the employer, suppose an employer has a particular opening for a position. Say for example, the employer wants to hire a carpenter, or maybe the employer wants to hire a sales manager. Now, once the employer realizes that he or she or the employer has a particular opening, the employer would want to advertise it on a couple of platforms, which would be 3 in a minimum. Then, along with the advertisement, the employer would use job bank and at the bank job match service to make sure that all the people who are applying to the jobs have been invited for an interview. Once the interviews are conducted, the employer would shortlist the number of candidates which are suitable for the job. If the employer is rejecting any permanent residents or citizens, the employer must keep a track of what are the reasons why is the permanent resident or the citizen not a good fit for the job. And when I'm saying permanent resident and citizen, I also mean native Canadians and all of those communities in Canada, which would make a holistic mix of citizens, permanent residents, native Canadians, and everybody, so that everybody is given an equal opportunity to apply for the job. Now, after the the interview or the scheduling happens, the employer must draft all the reasons and then also draft the reasons as to why the selected temporary foreign worker is more suitable for the job, and how the selected temporary foreign worker beats the competition in terms of the other permanent residents or the citizens who had applied for the job. After all of this happens, the employer would want to roll out a job offer to the employee, setting out all the conditions of around, say, housing allowances, travel, accommodation, workplace safety, then health and insurance, and then trainings, any mandatory trainings that are required. All of that is outlined in the job contract. After all of that is done, you prepare a whole package and then submit it on an online portal to the Service Canada. Service Canada will then take time to process these applications, and as you can see on the screen, the timelines are variable depending upon the kind of LMIA that you are submitting. After the application is picked up by the officer, the interview happens, and once the interview happens, the Service Canada officer will issue a decision. Now, let's look at the kind of documents that are usually required. There are two parts to this application, or rather the documentation. Because it's an employer sort of, it's a situation where the employer is the most important person here. So most of the documents are required by the employer only. The employee would be required to submit probably a resume and a passport only. And if there are any additional qualifications, say for example a driving license or maybe a trucking license or anything else, that may be required. Apart from that, every other document is required from the employer only. Now, we usually require documents which pertain to the financials of the company, the CRA documents, and the business legitimacy. Within that, documents like Schedule 100, 125, T4 summary, PD7As, then you have T2 generals. All such documents are required. Now, there is a proper checklist that is issued depending upon what the employer has, but we generally require the employer to have a 3-year operating history or at least 2 years operating history. There is no such minimum maximum revenue or profit numbers that are required. We just want the company to be healthy enough and making enough profits to sustain the salary of the existing employees. For example, if a company says that I have 7 employees or 10 employees, but my turnover is only 100,000 and I am only making, say, or probably I'm running in losses. Then if the company is already running in losses, making a revenue of just 100K, how can the company sustain 10 employees? It's impossible, right? So the numbers have to make sense in order for the business to continue its operations. The numbers also have to make sense in order to give job to this new guy. Say for example, the company is already running in losses. Then how will the company sustain the salary for this new person who's being hired, right? So the company must be profitable. They should be doing decent amount of numbers. Say there are already existing 3 permanent residents and citizens in the company. Then the 4th person could be hired as a temporary foreign worker. If it's a low wage position, then you would want to cap it to 20% of the workforce. And then there are other nitty-gritties also involved. If you have such questions, please feel free to schedule a consultation, because we would want to have a look at your size of the company, the numbers and everything, and then only we can recommend as to what is the ideal number of candidates you can hire. Generally, a number between 20 to 30% of the workforce should be an ideal to think of. The company should be profitable, should have decent numbers in revenue, which is sale and purchase, and should be able to sustain the business decision to hire a temporary foreign worker, which means the company's financials should be healthy. Apart from this, documents like, specific documents like the utility bills, lease agreements, if there are any business licenses to be attained. For example, a trucking LMIA would require the company to submit a fleet insurance, national safety certificate, a carrier profile, and then if there are any specific business licensing related requirements for the employer, such documents must be submitted. Well, all of this documentation is submitted online to ESDC, which is Service Canada, and definitely the process looks more overwhelming or a little more confusing at once, but still I think it's a good process. It's pretty easy to do, and we've done a lot of LMIAs, and LMIAs are usually a successful way to hire a temporary foreign worker. Well, no program in Canada is guaranteed for approvals for sure, like you already know, but this is still a good one to do. And then once an LMIA is processed, the LMIA is given to the employee or the LMIA number, and then the employee can apply for a closed work permit by himself or herself. Then that LMIA plus the personal documents of the employee, all that kit will be submitted to IRCC. Now then comes the immigration department. At first this was only Service Canada. Afterwards would come the IRCC, which is the immigration department, and then the process of the work permit or permanent residency or anything else would follow on. LMIA is done by the employer, all costs borne by the employer. Once the LMIA is given to the employee with a job offer, the employee will go for immigration related requirements. Guys, I hope the video today was helpful, gave you much insights into what exactly is an LMIA, how is an LMIA applied. If you have any questions, if you have any doubts, feel free to reach out to me on the number on the screen. The details are there in the description box as well. Please feel free to schedule a consultation, and I would be more than happy to speak with you. Once again, I wish you all the best, and I really hope to see you soon in Canada. All the best.